What is the concept of a well-being champion or wellness in general?
Sure, I'll start and then I'll turn it over to Mim. So in general, what's happening in the workplace now over the past 20 years, we've seen an increase in the use of workplace wellness programs. And what all the research shows and all the best practices show that those programs are most effective when you have a champion inside the workplace, preferably an employee who not only administers the program, but also is passionate about it and can bring everybody along to create a healthy work culture. Mim?
Right. And there has been a lot of talk out there about wellness that doesn't work. And this is one of the key reasons, because there are not true trained wellness champions within these organizations. And just from a dollar's perspective, if you're spending the money on these programs, you want them to get the engagement. You want them to be effective. And in order to do that, you really need to have a trained wellness champions network.
Cool. So it sounds like wellness champions are really important, and every business should have them.
Oh, yeah, definitely. That's the idea here. That is more and more in the world, the way the world is configured now, the stress that people face, the fact that the Affordable Care Act and a number of other factors in the United States have led to the increased use of wellness programs. What we're trying to tell everybody is that the programs by themselves may be great, but they're really not going to get your optimal impact without a champion.
Right. And I'd also just like to add that this is not just for large corporations. Smaller corporations, if you have 100 employees, if you have 50 employees, having a wellness champion there is very important. And whether your employees are going to the exchange, because usually wellness gets tied back to the benefits plan. But I think when you start to think about what we're facing in this country, and what I mean by that is that we have this war for talent going on, right? So how are you going to attract and retain talent? True wellness can actually be a key differentiator for you as an employer. But again, you have to have somebody internal driving the program. And with things like Glassdoor, just saying that you have it, having a checkbox program, well, it's pretty easy to figure that out. And so if you're using it in that capacity, you want to make sure you're doing it right.
When we're training champions, and I have our book here, Wellbeing Champions, a competency-based guidebook. When we train champions, and Mim has actually participated in one of our trainings, well, what we're basically doing is telling these champions that they're change agents, that they're leaders, that they have a key role to play in bringing other employees along so that those employees realize that their health is important too. It's sort of like, and I'll be brief and we can elaborate on this because there's a lot in our training. I'm letting you know as an employer, I'm letting you know as an employee that your health, your well-being, and in fact, your family's well-being is important to me. That's why I'm taking the time for this. Because I trust that you're going to care about what you're doing here more if you feel like we care about you. That's the bottom line. Right? Mm-hmm. That's the bottom line.
Right. And I think it's important to kind of think about it also in a much broader context. It's interesting that you brought up donuts and weight, right? Because traditionally we think about, these health and well-being programs, it's STEP programs, it's physical activity, and it's diet. But the truth is that wellness and wellness champions don't have to be the marathon runners. And that is something that I don't think most people understand. Traditionally you'll go in there and we want the people that are most active and most fit, but who are your biggest cost drivers? Who are the least engaged employees? And if they're looking at them as champions, are they really going to connect with them?
No.
Right. So part of this training and the efficacy part of this is, who are you as a person? And what's the story that you're going to tell as a wellness champion? And how do you deeply connect to that? And why does that work? Because we know that when you connect to your own personal story and you're that champion out there, and it could be about postpartum depression. It could be, I lost a child and went through this, this process. I've dedicated myself to having dinner with my family 3 nights a week. That's a wellness goal. And So that is the other thing about this training, is to get people to understand in a broader sense of what well-being really is and how that ties back to having engaged employees.
Yeah, I can, just thinking from my experiences as an employee, to be able to have a company that was interested in me, I can only see that that's going to be a positive thing about retention. And people are going to want to be able to stay there. And so that, that has nothing but wins in it for everybody along the line, the company, the employee, all of their customers, because then there's a continuity for years and decades.
And the champion, what the champion is sort of the glue that holds all that together. The manager or the CEO, even in a small company, may not be able to drive that. They have work to do. They're managing. They're building the business. So having somebody who can connect to those stories that Mim was talking about a minute ago, someone who's a key person in the social network of the workplace, someone who can marry this wellness program on one side with the stories and the issues of the employees on the other side. That's what a champion does. So what our training does is it gives champions at any level the skills to do that, to connect with their own story, to connect with other people's story, and to also say, hey, look at all these great benefits we have. You're not using them. You might want to consider using them. And here's what I learned from them. So it's making it personal and making it real. It's not an app. It's not a wearable. It's not the internet. It's not a smartphone. It's people.
Right, and it's somebody that you trust. And I also just want to add, because he was talking about tying the stories together with the people, it also gets tied back to the corporate bottom line. Because at the end of the day, if people are engaged with these programs, they like the culture that they're in, they know their company is supporting them, you will recruit better people, you will retain better people, and you will have more productive people. So it has a very real impact to the bottom line.
I'll talk, and then I want to bring it back to Mim, because as I said, Mim was originally a student in this. So we've actually done 5 installations of champion training. We first received a grant from NIH, National Institutes of Health, and we developed a program where we trained human resource professionals, employee assistance professionals, and wellness professionals in learning how to assess, design, deliver, and evaluate wellness programs. And as a big part of that, we were pushing this idea of evidence-based. That is, there are programs out there that anybody can, like I said, check the box, use the program. But there are also programs out there that have already been shown to be effective. So what we found with that program, and it was an online program with some webinar support, that the individuals who went through that, and these were people who were already working in wellness or HR, they became more confident in their ability to do those things. They became more confident in their ability to assess, design, deliver, and evaluate programs with the goal of making them work. So that was the first installation. And from that point, we were contacted by the National Guard, and Gary, you know about this because some of that training happened in St. Pete's, Florida. And we trained prevention coordinators pretty much to do the same thing, but as boots on the ground referral agents. These were people who said, hey, if you have a problem, you can come to me. And what happened as a result of that, we had a 200% increase in what's called self-referrals. That is, in the military, in the Guard, if you have a mental health or substance abuse problem, we're talking about real well-being problems. If you bring that forward, you're afraid of losing your job. And so what we were able to do is turn that around and make, to Mim's point, trust that champion and say, hey, can I talk to you for a minute? Maybe you can help me. So we were able to improve that for the Guard. And then we've also been doing that as well. And then we launched a couple of online trainings. And Mim took one where we took these competencies that we learned. In fact, it's on the wall here in the back, and I can show a slide, where we learned that from all of that previous work, there are certain key competencies that champions needed to have. And they're pretty straightforward, like how do I plan the program? How do I talk to my management and get their buy-in? How do I find key allies and partners in in a wellness committee? How do I find all the resources that I need? Those are competencies, each one of them, and they each require a certain level of skill. And what we found in our work is that when people did that, they again improved their confidence, their ability to speak to their manager, their ability to get money for their program. We've had people, as a result of our training, were able to persuade their management to give them more money for the wellness program. So those are some examples, but I want to bring it back to Mim because she's actually had some experience and as a graduate, a real super deluxe master level graduate.
Yeah, I think the wellness champion training and the thing that Joel didn't talk about, we are learning new things in this industry every single day. There is new research. I mean, you constantly have to be on top of it. Not only is it, going through the competencies and finding out where I need to improve myself, but it also connects you to the other people in the training. And I have to tell you, that is invaluable because if you're working in a different environment, if you start down the path of a new program, you now have a network of people that are also competent, but you can bounce ideas off of. And I have found that to be one of the biggest benefits. The training was great, and it certainly helped me to improve my own skills. But I don't want to, undervalue those relationships and how that helps you actually become a much better professional.
Mim and I have talked about, and we have upcoming, and will continue to have what we call a boot camp. And so the boot camp is a live 2-day intensive where people can come together and experience that community of practice that Mim was talking about in a face-to-face environment. And that, in many ways, I prefer because a lot of real learning happens when you're in that face-to-face. So we have that. We also have online, which is several weeks sessions that happen week to week over a 6-week period. And we convey the material through recorded webinars and videos. So in both of those venues, both of those opportunities, people receive the competencies, they receive materials, they get the books. We have several books, the Champion Guidebook. We also have our book, Heart-Centered Leadership, and also Raw Coping Power. And I'll talk a little bit about that, and then I'll turn it back to Mim, because a key part of all of this, and this is also true in the research on champions, if you're going to be a champion, you have to be resilient. You cannot be a champion and expect that success is going to happen right out of the gate.
No, persistence.
Persistence is everything. And that's where the community comes in, because people go, what do I do? Oh my gosh, they're asking me to cut my budget in half, it's crazy. And so people turn to each other and they learn how to bounce back together. So part of that is that raw coping power, that resilience is part of that. So there's a lot of tools in both of those trainings, and that's why we're making it flexible. If people want to come to a live, great. If they want to come online, great.
I'm happy to talk about that. I mean, and as somebody who kind of has I came out of the financial world and I did benefits design. So I am real clear when you're sitting across from a CFO and they're saying, okay, well, we're going to spend this money. What are we going to get out of this? But what I find interesting, and this is actually from a SHRM study that was done, is that most companies only spend approximately 2% of their total healthcare spend on wellness or preventive care. Is there, which to me is kind of mind-blowing. I'm just going to say it out loud, but I really do believe that, because there is such focus on, we want people to be engaged, we want people to be healthy, we want them to show up, we want them to be great creative problem solvers. And yet we spend so much more money on sick care once somebody is already broken, is already stressed out, versus that investment that we make into helping people. And I know you mentioned safety committees at the beginning, and this is another thing that I get, I said, don't you find it fascinating that manufacturers have no problem spending money on training safety committees, and they get that if these work well, your workers' comp claims are going to, ultimately be lower, hopefully. Now, again, accidents happen. But we don't take this approach typically around health. And so it's an education that I think needs to happen. And again, this is what part of this training is all about, is to teach the people that are running these programs to start to talk about these things in this way from a business perspective. This will help you. If you make the investment, there is a real value to the company. Again, not just because of your employees' health and well-being, also how we're seen as an employer of choice. And, and again, I know we keep harping on, the war for talent, but it is out there. And companies are seriously going to need to think about this if they're going to have a viable workforce over the next 5 to 10 years.
Another way, that's great, Mim. And I think it really clarifies that this is an investment that just makes sense, practically speaking, not just financially. It's not just talent, it's also building a culture that lets other people know. It's retention and recruitment. And regarding the money piece, $14 billion gets spent annually on leadership development. Just on leadership development, $14 billion in the United States. And when you think about leadership development, that's training on your middle management and above so that you have people who know how to run the business. But most of that leadership training, or not most, but a large part of it, is how to relate to people, how to build that social culture, emotional intelligence. And so what the champion training does is it brings that further down. So I'm going to have to say that we have to wrap this up in a minute, and we have a time for maybe one more question, Gary.
No, I just think that, it's fascinating because I know, just from my own experiences, I went, factory work, we had a lot of safety issues, but there was no connection that if I had a stressful situation going on at home, or other guys had abuse issues, or a lot of other things. So you can do all this safety training, but if I come in a funk, I'm still going to screw up, and so there's no connection. So I think from hearing what you're saying is that you're bringing these down to this other level where there can be the connection, and you're looking at the whole person, which brings into the whole company.
Right.
And so you talk about the price versus value. The Zig Ziglar quote all the time. Price is the one-time investment, and value is over a lifetime.